My stepsister accused me of sleeping with her husband. My parents kicked me out without listening. But 8 months later, I discovered it was all a lie to cover her affair, and the truth left them destroyed. I'm 28 years old. I work in digital marketing. And about a year and a half ago, something happened that basically destroyed my entire relationship with my family. Or, well, with my parents specifically. Because it turns out my stepsister Victoria accused me of having an affair with her husband, and my parents believed her without even asking me first. I guess I should start from the beginning, so this makes sense. Because the truth is, it's a pretty long and complicated story. But I need to tell it because it still affects me, and I feel like writing it down is going to help me somehow. My mom married Victoria's dad when I was like 12 years old, I think, or maybe 13. I don't remember exactly. Victoria was 2 years older than me, and from the beginning, things were weird between us. You know, we weren't enemies or anything like that, but we weren't close either. She lived primarily with her biological mom, but would come over every other weekend and during holidays, and I got used to her being there, although we never developed that sister bond my parents hoped we'd have. What I do remember perfectly is that Victoria was always, how do I put it, very good at getting what she wanted. Like manipulative, but in a subtle way that my parents never saw. She could cry when she needed something, and my parents would run to help her, whereas if I asked for anything, it was like I had to justify it 3 times. Fast forward to when I was about 25 years old. Victoria had been married to Christopher for 2 years by then. They lived in a nice house about 20 minutes from where my parents lived, and I was working at a small marketing agency. Nothing special, but I liked it. Christopher was, well, is, a pretty normal guy. Worked in finance or something like that. He was always nice to me at family gatherings, but we never had a close relationship. Literally, we only saw each other at Christmas and birthdays, and maybe talked for 5 minutes about the weather or work. We weren't friends. We didn't even have each other's phone numbers saved. That level of distance. The thing is that one Sunday in March, I think it was March because it was still cold but not as much, I was at my apartment chilling watching a series on Netflix when my dad called me. I answered like, "Hey Dad, what's up?" And he was off. His voice sounded tense and he told me, "I need you to come to the house right now. We need to talk about something serious." And I obviously got scared because my dad never talked to me like that. So I asked him what was going on, but he just repeated, "Come to the house. Now," and hung up. I put on some jeans and a hoodie and drove to my parents' house with my heart beating super fast because I thought maybe someone had died or something horrible had happened. When I got there, my mom, my dad, and Victoria were in the living room. Victoria had red eyes like she'd been crying. My mom was hugging her, and my dad looked at me with a face I'd never seen on him before, like disgust, mixed with anger. I stood there at the door and said, "What's going on? What happened?" And my dad just told me straight up, "Victoria told us, you've been having an affair with Christopher." And I laughed. I mean, I literally laughed because I thought it was an absurd joke, but nobody else was laughing. I looked at Victoria and she had this perfect victim expression, with tears running down her cheeks, and my mom was looking at me with total disappointment. I said, "What? That's ridiculous. That's literally impossible. I have nothing to do with Christopher. We're not even friends." And my dad interrupted me and said, "Don't lie to us. Victoria has proof." I asked what proof, and Victoria took out her phone and showed me a series of text messages supposedly between Christopher and me, talking about meeting up in secret and saying romantic things or whatever. But I knew that was fake because I had never sent those messages. So I said, "Those messages are fake. Someone made them up. I never wrote that. You can check my phone right now." My mom said, "Please don't make this worse. Just admit what you did." And I was starting to panic because I realized they were seriously accusing me, and nobody was listening to me. I tried to explain that it didn't make sense, that I had no reason to do that I didn't even talk to Christopher outside of family gatherings. But my dad cut me off and said, "That's enough. Victoria also has witnesses who saw you together at a cafe." And I shouted, "What witnesses? That never happened, because I've never been anywhere with Christopher." Victoria was sobbing louder, and my mom said to me, "How can you lie like that to your sister's face after doing this to her?" And that's when I realized it didn't matter what I said. They had already decided I was guilty. My dad stood up and told me, "I want you to get all your stuff out of this house today. You're not welcome here ever again." And I just stood there, unable to process what was happening. I said, "Dad, you." Can't be serious. And he said, "You have 2 hours. After that, I'm changing the locks." My mom didn't say anything, just kept hugging Victoria. I went up to my old room because I still had some stuff there from when I lived with them. Boxes from college and old clothes and sentimental things. And I started putting everything in trash bags because I didn't even have suitcases there. My hands were shaking so much I could barely grab things. And I kept thinking, is this really happening? Are they really kicking me out of the house for something I didn't do? I loaded like 6 big bags into my car and my dad was standing at the door making sure I left. I tried to talk to him one more time. I said, "Dad, please listen to me. This is a huge mistake. I didn't do anything." But he just looked at me and said, "Get off my property before I call the police." So I left. I drove not knowing where to go because I lived alone in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, but I couldn't process what had just happened. And I ended up calling my best friend Olivia, crying hysterically. Olivia told me to come to her apartment immediately. When I got there, I told her everything, and she was just as shocked as I was because she knew my family and knew that accusation was completely false. She said to me, "This is crazy. Why would Victoria make something like that up?" And I had no idea. I mean, Victoria and I were never super close, but we didn't have big problems either. There was no reason for her to do something so horrible to me. Olivia let me stay on her couch, and the next few days were basically a blur. I tried calling my parents, but neither answered. I sent them messages explaining that it was all a lie, but they had blocked me. And I started feeling this horrible desperation that my entire family had abandoned me over a lie. Like a week later, I tried going to the house again. I knocked on the door and my mom opened, but when she saw me, she started closing the door. I put my foot to stop it from closing and I begged her, "Mom, please just listen to me for 5 minutes. Let me explain what really happened." But she shook her head and said, "I don't want to hear more lies. Please leave," and closed the door in my face. I stood there on the porch like an idiot and a neighbor was watching me from her yard with curiosity. So eventually, I just left. The next few weeks were probably the worst of my life. I stayed on Olivia's couch for like a month because she insisted I not rush to find a place, but I felt terrible being a burden. You know, she had her life and her routine, and I was there depressed, taking up her space. I was looking for cheap apartments I could afford with my salary and eventually found a tiny studio, like literally 30 square meters or something, in a not very nice area of the city, but it was what I could afford. I moved there with my trash bags of clothes and bought an air mattress at Walmart because I didn't have money for real furniture. I tried to keep busy with work, but I'm hard to concentrate, because I was constantly thinking about what had happened. Why had Victoria made up that story? What did she gain from destroying my relationship with our parents? It didn't make sense. Sometimes I'd wake up at night in that horrible studio and feel so lonely it literally hurt in my chest, like that physical feeling of loneliness you can't ignore. Olivia visited me often and forced me to go out to eat or walk in the park because she knew if she left me alone all the time, I was going to sink completely. Like 3 or 4 months later, I think it was June or July by then, I decided to try one more time to talk to my parents. I went to the house on a Saturday morning and knocked on the door. My dad opened, and when he saw me, his face went hard. I said, "Dad, I need you to listen to me. I know you're angry, but please give me a chance to explain." And he said, "There's nothing to explain. We know what you did. Victoria showed us everything." I told him. What Victoria showed. "You is fake. She's lying for some reason. I don't understand. Please just let me in and let's talk as a family." But he shook his head and said, "You're no longer part of this family. What you did is unforgivable." And closed the door. I stood there, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach, and I finally accepted that I wasn't going to be able to fix this, at least not yet. The following months were basically surviving. I worked, came back to my studio, ate frozen food, repeat. I stopped trying to contact my parents because it was too painful to keep being rejected. Olivia kept being my lifeline. On weekends, she'd force me to do things with her, go to the movies or get coffee. Normal things that made me feel human again, even if temporarily. Little by little, I bought used furniture on Facebook Marketplace, a real bed, an old couch, a little table, making the studio feel less depressing. And then, like in October, 8 months after all this had started, I received an email. It was from Christopher. The subject said, "I need to talk to you urgently," and when I opened it, it said he needed to see me in person to tell me something important about Victoria. My first instinct was to delete it because I thought maybe it was a trap or something, but something about the tone of the message sounded genuine, like desperate. I replied, asking what he wanted to talk about, and he said, "I prefer to tell you in person. Can you meet me tomorrow at the Starbucks on Main Street?" And I don't know why, agreed. I went to Starbucks super nervous, not knowing what to expect. Christopher was already there when I arrived. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days, dark circles under his eyes and grown-out beard. We sat down and he started apologizing. He said, "I'm so sorry about everything that happened. I didn't know Victoria had accused you of that until recently." I said, "Wait, what? You didn't know?" And he explained that Victoria had told him a completely different story. That I had tried to seduce him but that he'd rejected me, and that's why she had told my parents. But it turns out he had found Victoria's old phone a few weeks ago when he was cleaning the garage, and when he turned it on, he found messages she had sent using a fake number, pretending to be me to send those texts she had shown my parents. I stayed quiet processing this, and Christopher kept talking. He said he had also found evidence that Victoria had been having a real affair with a guy from her work for the last year and a half, basically since before she accused me, and that she had probably used me as a scapegoat to cover up her own infidelity. He showed me screenshots of everything on his phone, the fake messages Victoria had created pretending to be me, conversations between her and the other guy coordinating meetups, photos, everything. It was overwhelming to see all the evidence of something I already knew was true, but that nobody had believed me about. I asked him why he was telling me all this now, and he said he felt guilty, that he had been so blinded by Victoria's manipulation that he hadn't realized what was really happening, and that when he found all this evidence, he realized I had been completely innocent and that my family had rejected me for nothing. He asked if he could use that evidence to clear my name with my parents, and I said, "Yes, obviously. Please." Christopher sent me all the screenshots by email and told me he was also going to talk to my parents directly to explain what he had discovered. That night, I barely slept. I had all this evidence that proved my innocence, but I was also terrified of the confrontation that was coming. I waited like 2 days to calm down and organize my thoughts, and then I went to my parents' house again. This time, I brought my laptop with all the emails and screenshots ready to show. I knocked on the door and my mom opened. She looked surprised to see me there again, and before she could close the door, I told her, "I need for you to see something." Christopher contacted me and gave me evidence that Victoria lied about everything. My mom stood there undecided and finally let me in. My dad was in the living room, and when he saw me, he tensed up but didn't say anything. I sat down and opened my laptop and showed them everything. The fake messages Victoria had created, the evidence of her real affair with the other guy, everything organized chronologically. I watched them process the information, their faces changing from confusion to shock to what looked like horror. My dad said, "Is this real?" And I told him, "Yes. Christopher found all this on Victoria's old phone. He's going to come talk to you himself if you don't believe me." There was a long and super uncomfortable silence. My mom started crying and said, "Oh my God, what did we do?" And my dad looked like someone had hit him. They tried to apologize right there. They said they were so sorry, that they had made a terrible mistake, that please forgive them. But I was feeling too many things at the same time to respond calmly. I told them, "You kicked me out of your lives without even hearing my side. You treated me like I was trash. You made me feel worthless. And all because you believed Victoria without questioning her. You're my parents. You were supposed to be on my side, or at least give me the benefit of the doubt." My mom kept crying and my dad kept apologizing over and over, and part of me wanted to hug them and forgive them immediately because I had missed them horribly during those months, but another part of me was too hurt and angry to just forget everything that had happened. I told them I needed time to process everything, that I couldn't just go back to normal like nothing had happened, and I hoped they understood that. My dad said he understood and that they'd be there when I was ready to talk more. The next few days were weird. Christopher did go talk to my parents and confirmed everything I had shown them. Apparently, Victoria tried to deny everything at first, but eventually, when she realized there was too much evidence against her, she basically collapsed and admitted she had made up everything about my supposed affair to distract from her own infidelity. My parents were devastated, not only because they had lost 8 months with me over a lie, but because they realized Victoria had completely manipulated them. What's interesting is that when the truth came to light, Other family members and Victoria's friends also started distancing themselves from her. Apparently, it wasn't the first time Victoria had lied or manipulated situations for her benefit, but this time she had gone too far and people didn't want anything to do with her anymore. Her reputation basically crumbled. Friends who had supported her when she was the victim of the affair now avoided her completely, and Christopher started the divorce process immediately. My parents called me every 2 or 3 days trying to rebuild the relationship, but I was honest with them about the fact that I needed time. I agreed to meet them for coffee like a month after the confrontation, and it was awkward at first, but eventually we were able to talk more openly about everything that had happened. My mom admitted she had always had a blind spot with Victoria because she felt guilt that Victoria hadn't grown up with her full time, and that probably made her less critical of things Victoria said or did. My dad said he had simply assumed Victoria wouldn't have a reason to lie about something so serious, and that now he realized he had failed as a father by not listening to my version before making such a drastic decision. I explained to them that while I appreciated their apologies, the damage they had caused wasn't going to disappear overnight. I had lost trust in them, and rebuilding that was going to take a lot of time and effort on their part. I set some boundaries, like I didn't want them to try to minimize what had happened or justify to their actions, and that I needed them to respect my space when I asked for it. They accepted everything and said they would do whatever was necessary to eventually regain my trust. As for Victoria, my parents ended up kicking her out of the house too. Apparently, after everything came to light, Victoria kept trying to manipulate situations and play the victim, and my parents finally had enough. I think she's living with her biological mom now or something. Honestly, I don't know much because I have no interest in knowing about her. Christopher finalized the divorce like 3 months ago, and from what I know, he moved to another state to start over, which I don't blame him for. Now, like a year and a half after all this started, I'm in a much better place. I still live in my small studio, but I've decorated it nicely, and it feels like a real home. My relationship with my parents is improving little by little. I see them every 2 or 3 weeks for a meal or a walk, and although there are still awkward moments and unresolved things, at least we're working on it. I've learned to set clearer boundaries with them, and they've learned to respect those boundaries. What surprises me most is that even though all this was horrible and traumatic and basically destroyed my sense of family for almost a year, it also taught me who was really there for me when things got difficult. Olivia proved to be an incredible friend who supported me without question when everyone else had abandoned me. And that's something I'll never forget. I also learned I can survive things I thought would completely break me. Like being completely alone and rejected by your family is basically one of the worst things that can happen to you. And still, I came out the other side. Will I completely forgive my parents someday? I don't know, honestly. Part of me still feels that pain of having been abandoned so easily, of not having been important enough to them to at least hear my side before destroying our relationship. But another part of me understands they were manipulated by Victoria in a very calculated way, and that they made a terrible mistake, but now they're genuinely trying to make amends. I guess time will tell if we can really rebuild what was broken. As for Victoria, I have no desire to confront her or have any kind of relationship with her ever again. What she did to me was unforgivable, and there's no explanation or apology that can justify deliberately ruining my life to cover up her own lies. The last time I heard about her was when my mom mentioned Victoria had tried to contact her to ask for money or something, and my mom told her no, that she wasn't going to keep allowing her manipulative behavior anymore. I'm glad my parents finally opened their eyes about who Victoria really is, although I wish they had done it before destroying our family relationship. Last Friday, I went for a walk with my mom in the park near her house. The weather was nice and we were talking about casual things, my work, her plants, nothing deep. And at one point, she stopped and said to me, "I know I'll never be able to make up for the time we lost and for the pain we caused you, but I want you to know that every day I regret not listening to you when you needed me to." I told her I knew that, and I appreciated her saying it, and we kept walking. And that's enough for now, I guess. We're not where we were before all this happened, and we'll probably never get back to that place. But we're building something new, something different. And maybe that's the best we can do after everything that happened.